Good day, ma'am. Good day, classmate. I am Jhon Neri, and I am the reporter of Lesson 19 Laws and Policies on Violence and Discrimination of the members of LGBTQ. So, for our lesson objectives, at the end of the lesson, you should be able to determine the Philippine laws and policies, law protection of rights of member of LGBT+, identify the different anti-discriminatory law and policies, and know the acts leading to violence of these law and policies. The 1987 Constitution, or also known as Equal Protection and Due Process Clause, which state that the state values the dignity of every human person and guarantee full respect for human rights. No person shall be deprived life, liberty, or property without the process of law, nor shall any one person can be denied. So, means that the Philippine 1987 Constitution guarantees the protection of human rights, including equal protection under the law, and the law, and the right due process. This means that every individual, regardless of their background, is entitled to the protection of their dignity and rights. The clause protects citizens from discrimination, ensuring that no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without fair legal procedures. So, for examples, a person cannot be arrested or detained without proper legal processes, ensuring their rights are respected. So now let us proceed the violence and discrimination. Despite widespread anecdotal evidence of crimes perpetrated against the LGBTQ+ community in the Philippines, most data on these cases have not undergone official verification and collation. This means that though there is significant anecdotal evidence of violence and discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community in the Philippines, there is a lack of verified data on such incidents. This highlights the difficulty in understanding the full scope of the problem and the need for more systematic tracking of these cases to enforce rights and protections effectively. So for example, a transgender person experience workplace discrimination but is unable to report it because the data collection system does not effectively track LGBT+ discriminatory cases, or discrimination rather. But before we proceed, the violence and discriminations came from the other aspects, or in such workplace and education. So let us now proceed in education. And now let us proceed the violence and discrimination from youth in education and workplace. Now, from violence and discrimination against LGBTQ+ youth in education, it has Anti-Bullying Act of 2013, or the Republic Act of 10627, it includes gender-based bullying as a prohibited and punishable act. And gender-based bullying is defined as any act that humiliates or excludes a person on the basis of perceived or actual sexual orientation and gender identity, or SOGI, in the Public Act 10627. So it means that Anti-Bullying Act of 2013, Republic Act of 10627, this law prohibits gender-based bullying, particularly bullying based on a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. It emphasizes that any act that humiliates or excludes someone based on their SOGI is illegal, reflecting the government's stance on protecting individuals from discrimination in schools. For example, a student is bullied at school for being openly gay, and the incident is addressed under the Anti-Bullying Act, where the bully is disciplined. So for the Child Protection Policy of 2012, in cases where the bullying is committed by a principal, teacher, or any other school personnel, the law being violated is Department of Education Order number 40 on Child Protection Policy. The Child Protection Policy mandates that schools officials, including teachers and administrators, are held accountable for any bullying or abusive behavior they may commit against students. If school personnel are found to be involved in bullying, it is a violation of this policy. So for example, a teacher is reported for bullying a student due to their gender identity, violating the Child Protection Policy, which mandates a school environment free from abuse. For special protection of children against child abuse, exploitation, and discrimination Act of 1992, or also known as the Anti-Child Abuse Act or Republic Act 7610, or the parents of children who suffer abuse at the hands of the teachers or members of the school administrations violates RA 7610, the Anti-Child Abuse Act. Means that the Special Protection of Children Against Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act of 1992, this law protects children from abuse and exploitation, including those who are subjected to mistreatment by school officials or other adults in authority. If a teacher or a school administrator abuses a student, the parents can seek legal resources based on this law. For example, a parent files a case under RA 7610 after a teacher physically harms a children for expressing themselves outside traditional gender norms. Now, let us proceed the violence and discrimination against LGBT plus in the workplace. It has the Labor Code of the Philippines, PD 442, or the Labor Code is the national law covering employment for the private sector in the Philippines, with the exception of prohibitions against discrimination of women. It doesn't contain any provision that prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity, particularly on the members of the LGBT class. So the Labor Code of the Philippines, PD 442, is the primary addresses employment rights in the private sector and includes provisions against discrimination based on sex, but it doesn't explicitly address discrimination based on gender identity. While this omission leaves a gap in protection for LGBTQ+ workers, the general declaration for promoting equal work opportunities is a step in the right decision. For example, a private company may not explicitly prohibit discrimination based on gender identity, but under the Labor Code's broader principles of equal opportunity, an LGBTQ+ employee could challenge unfair treatment. So from today's in the present, it happens that, as we can see, that some of workers is being discriminated because of their gender identity or ilang gender, and because of that, the person who are gay, for example, are gay that apply work, they are being discriminated because they are the member of the LGBT+. They feel unfair treatment. So now let us proceed the Civil Service Commission 010940, or the Civil Service Commission Policy on Anti-Sexual Harassment. The Civil Service Commission administrative disciplinary rules on sexual harassment cases includes other less grave punishable offenses. This includes prohibiting derogatory and degrading remark, grave punishable related toward the members of one sex or one sexual orientation are used to be described a person. So it means this policy ensures that public employees are protected from sexual harassment and derogatory remarks in the workplace. Even though their children identity is not specifically mentioned, LGBTQ plus employees are still protected under this policy, which prohibits offensive or degrading remarks based on sex or sexual orientation. For example, a gay civil servant experiences harassment when a co-worker makes demeaning comments about their sexual orientation. The civil servant can file a case under the anti-sexual harassment rules even though the policy doesn't explicitly mention LGBTQ+. The fact that the perpetrator and the victim are the same level or position will not preclude the victim from filing a case, while gender identity is not specifically mentioned as a ground. If a LGBTQ civil servant is harassed verbally by a co-workers, they would be able to rely on the generic protection from derogatory and degrading remarks. Each of these laws and policies represented an effort by the Philippine government to protect human rights and prevent discrimination, with varying degrees of specificity regarding gender identity and sexual orientation. That's all for my part.